Welcome to the Aging Boomers. I'm your host, Frank Sampson, and on the Aging Boomers, we discuss many of the issues facing boomers and an aging population, parents, etc. Today, a lot of hot topics that affect a lot of people, and we've had some great people on the show, and we've gotten pretty excited that now iTunes has us on there. You could go to iTunes, just type in the Aging Boomers. You could download, listen to any of our shows. We've had, I think this is number 8 now. And so we're pretty excited about that. You could also go to if you have an iPhone or an Android, we even have a app that you could download. Again, just go into your search, type in the Aging Boomers, download it, and love to hear any comments you have. Go to iTunes, give us comments. We always want to make improvements, but we're getting some great input from people. And I'm extremely excited about our guest. I'm excited about all of our guests, but we have with us dr-anrews-zwilling. She's originally from Trinidad Tobago, which is, by the way, I've been there. It's beautiful there, where she completed her Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry and Chemistry. From there, she went to train at the prestigious Max Planck Institute, I don't know if I pronounced it right, for experimental medicine in Germany, where she received both her Master of Science and PhD in neuroscience. Today, Dr. Anrews-Zwilling is establishing her own research program to develop drugs that block the detrimental effects of, it's called APOE4, which we're going to learn what that is in a moment, on nerve cells, and in collaboration with Dr. Mailey at the Gladstone Institute. So Dr. Anrews-Zwilling is the recipient of many awards, including the Award for Young Scientists from the Alzheimer's Association and the National Award for Excellence in Science from the National Institute of Higher Education, Research, Science, and Technology, the Ministry of Science and Technology, and the Caribbean Academy of Science. Dr. Anrews-Zwilling, it's just a pleasure to have you on The Aging Boomers.
Thank you so much for asking me to be on. Thank you.
Yeah, I could have gone on with a lot of accolades about your background, but I don't know if we would have had time for the interview. But it's,
thank you. That was a very generous introduction. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, that's well, you deserve it. So, why don't you tell us a little bit, about Gladstone Institute, kind of what happens there, your role. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you. So the Gladstone Institute is an independent biomedical research institute, and we are based on the Mission Bay campus in San Francisco. We are affiliated with UCSF, so we have a very strong collaboration with them, but we are an independent research organization, and we tackle some of the major diseases affecting mankind today. So we have 3 institutes within the Gladstone. The first is the Institute of Immunology and Virology, and there we research HIV, diabetes, hepatitis, and so on. Then we have the Institute of Cardiovascular Disease, where we look at heart disease and also stem cell technology, which is a really big field right now. And then finally, the institute that I'm a part of is the Institute of Neurological Disease. And within our institute, we look at Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and so on. So we tackle all of the major diseases affecting mankind today.
You have your work cut out for you.
Yes, definitely. Especially with the neurological diseases. It's a very difficult area to work in because the mind is it's so complex. So, yeah, we do have our work cut out for us.
So tell our audience, is it even possible to determine how many people have dementia today? If so, do you know approximately what those numbers are, and what do we see changing over the next couple of decades?
So that's a really good question. So if we start maybe by first defining what some of these terms are. So dementia is just a general term for a decline in mental ability severe enough to interfere with your daily life. And memory loss is one example of this. And then Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia. And then if we're talking numbers, according to the Alzheimer's Association, currently we have 5.1 million people living with Alzheimer's disease. And this number is expected to triple by mid-century, and this doesn't even include other forms of dementia. Alzheimer's disease is just one form. And then if nothing is done to change the course of this disease, by 2050, the estimated costs associated with caring for and treating Alzheimer's disease patients could be as high as $1 trillion in the U.S. alone. And this doesn't even account for the intangible cost of diminished quality of life, both for the patients and for their caregivers.
Do you think we're prepared? When I say we, do you think the United States is prepared for what's going to happen?
I don't think so. I mean, I think there's definitely a lot more awareness right now because of people like you and all of the boomers who are no longer accepting that dementia and Alzheimer's disease is a normal part of aging. This does not have to happen. So there's definitely more money going into research and trying to figure out what causes Alzheimer's disease, how can we prevent it, how can we cure it. But I think the sheer number of people that are currently living with Alzheimer's, and as I said, this number is going to triple and then go on and on as we all age. I don't think we are fully prepared for what's coming, which is why places like the Gladstone and people who do try to figure out the role of basic science and investigators like me, it's really critical to find solutions for these complex diseases. And that's really the only way that we're going to try to change the outcome.
Yeah. I know you mentioned earlier Alzheimer's is a form of dementia. Mm-hmm. You don't have to get into the detail. We don't have the time for it on the show, but why don't you briefly go over other types of dementia that we're dealing with, and it just very briefly, maybe the differences between those types of dementia and Alzheimer's.
So basically, depending on what part of your brain you have neuronal or nerve loss, this then leads to the type of symptoms that you see. So, for example, as I said, dementia is just a general term for decline in mental ability that's severe enough to interfere with your daily life. So with Alzheimer's disease, it starts off with memory and then it progresses. With other types of dementia, for example, vascular dementia or frontotemporal dementia or even dementia associated with Parkinson's disease, these all lead to a decline in your mental ability, but depending on the part of the brain that is affected, that determines then the type of difficulty that you have. So one really common form of neurological disease that people know, in addition to Alzheimer's, is Parkinson's, for example. And in Parkinson's disease, the cells that die are within the center of your brain that's responsible for motion and movement. So within Parkinson's, for example, you have the tremor and the rigidity and an inability to initiate movement, and that's because that particular part of your brain is breaking down. In Alzheimer's, it's because the hippocampus, which is the part of your brain responsible for your memories, this is the part of the brain that's breaking down, and that then leads to the symptoms that we see. So depending on the place that you have the brain loss, it then leads to a loss of that particular function in your daily life.
So when somebody says, and I hear this all the time, I think my dad's fine. I mean, he doesn't remember things that just happened, but boy, he could get into a lot of detail of what happened many years ago. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, this is kind of in the early stages of, for example, what could be Alzheimer's disease. And this is because, as I said, this area of the brain called the hippocampus, this is the area that's responsible for forming new memories. So that's why in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease, it's often things that just happened recently, where you parked your car, where you put your keys. And now we all have lapses in memory, especially today where we're all multitasking and on our phone, etc. It only becomes a problem when this loss of memory really is affecting your daily life. So you can't remember where you parked your car, and this is then a problem. You don't remember that you left the stove on, for example. So in the early stages, yes, you forget recent events, but the long-term memories, those are not stored in the hippocampus, which is the part of the brain that initially breaks down. those are stored somewhere else in your brain. So that's why early on in Alzheimer's, you lose the more recent memories because you can't form those and hold on to those. But the long-term memories that you had from childhood and early marriage, etc., those are still intact initially. But as the disease progresses, the patients also lose those memories.
Yeah, I can't remember who told me this, but I use this example quite a bit. And it's you don't have dementia or anything. Don't worry if you misplace your car keys. The worry would be if you didn't know that the keys were for a car or that you even had a car. So,
exactly. Exactly.
So, yeah. Okay. Great. So I guess I know there's people listening who may have had a loved one in their family who has had Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, and they worry, am I going to get it now because my mom had it? I mean, what research has been done as far as whether or not it's hereditary or not?
So that's a really excellent question. So there's definitely a small portion of the population of Alzheimer's disease patients where it is a hereditary factor. And this is about 5% to 10% of all cases. And in this case, it's a mutation in particular genes that have been identified. So one of the genes is called amyloid precursor protein, APP, and mutations in this gene or the processing of this protein leads to early onset Alzheimer's disease. And this is where patients get the disease in their 40s or 50s. This is relatively rare. The vast majority of cases are the late onset and sporadic forms of Alzheimer's disease. And there are different causes that can lead to this. One of the major risk factors that leads to getting Alzheimer's disease at all is aging. So the older we get, the more likely, once you cross 75, 85, etc., there is then the risk that you do develop Alzheimer's disease because age is the biggest risk factor. And then within this late onset population, there's also another gene called ApoE and ApoE4, which is the protein that I work on. And this also contributes significantly. It's a major known genetic risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease.
So is there a way to determine if someone has ApoE4?
Yes, there is. So one can do a genetic test, and this is one of the readouts that you would get if you are ApoE4 positive or not. So one thing I should mention is that we all have this ApoE protein. There are two major forms of the protein, ApoE3, which is the more common form, so about 75% of the population has it, and then ApoE4, which is the form that predisposes you to getting Alzheimer's disease. So 1 in 4 of us, for example, is an ApoE4 carrier. And if you do have this ApoE4 protein, it increases your risk of getting Alzheimer's disease, and it also decreases the age of onset of getting the disease. And you can get tested to find out if you are an ApoE4 carrier.
So if you're an ApoE4 carrier, it doesn't mean that you're going to get the disease. No.
Your risk of getting it is simply higher than if you were an ApoE3 carrier. But one thing that I also have to say is that ApoE3 carriers also can get Alzheimer's disease. Your risk is lower. But as I said, once you cross a particular age, there is still a risk that even if you're an ApoE3 carrier, that you can get it. Your risk is simply higher, significantly higher, if you are an ApoE4 carrier.
So why would I want to know if I was an APO4 carrier? Why would I even want to know?
So I think it depends maybe on your personality and how you view having this knowledge. Because currently we don't have effective drugs to cure or slow down or treat Alzheimer's disease. So if you did have the knowledge that you are an E4 carrier and knowing that you have a higher risk of getting the disease, there's nothing specifically that you can do with respect to taking drugs to help. But there are definite lifestyle changes that you can have, which you should have anyway. But if you know that you're a carrier, and if this knowledge would propel you, for example, to do more things that would try to stave off Alzheimer's disease later in life, knowing that you have a higher risk, then this is definitely something that you should do.
So give us an example of some of these lifestyle changes. What could people do?
So there are a couple of things that you can do. One of the main things that you can do is avoiding head trauma. There is a huge risk if one has some form of traumatic brain injury, whether it is from playing contact sports or especially boxing, for example, if you were to join the armed forces, and so on. So avoiding any kind of situation where you can have head trauma would be the major thing that you can do. Secondly, what's important for your heart is very good for your head. So avoiding cardiovascular disease, exercising, avoiding diabetes and high blood pressure and so on. So all of these kind of lifestyle changes that one can have of leading as healthy a life as possible is very, very important. And then thirdly, kind of the use it or lose it model. So the bigger, it's called cognitive reserve. So the bigger cognitive reserve one has, it's kind of seen as a way that if you lose some later, you had a bigger pool to lose from, so you're a little bit more protected. So trying to be a lifelong learner, learning new things, learning to dance, which would also give you the exercise, obviously, but trying to keep your brain as active as possible for as long as possible is also a major thing that we can do.
I'm going to ask you a question I think I know the answer to, but I think would be interesting to our listeners. So let's say I do crossword puzzles. Yeah. I do it all the time, and I pick up the New York Times, and I just got it down. I say, well, I'm keeping my brain active because I do these crossword puzzles, but I'm an expert at it. What would you say to that?
I would say that's excellent that you're doing these crossword puzzles, but at this point where you think you're an expert, maybe you should find something else that's also challenging you. Mm-hmm. I think you should definitely continue with that because those puzzles are quite difficult. I'm not that great at them myself. So maintaining this is definitely a great way to go, but you should then try to challenge yourself with something else, some other mind-challenging project that you can take up. And when you're done doing your crossword puzzle, you should go for a walk or a run.
So do something maybe out of your comfort zone.
Exactly. Yeah, something to just keep the mind going and also to keep the body going.
Yeah. I tried, somebody told me, try brushing your teeth with your non-dominant hand. All right. So I tried doing it with my left hand, and I just get toothpaste all over my face. So,
that's a good exercise, yeah.
So this research you're doing is just so important. How do you feel the research will one day help with Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia?
So there's lots of research going on in many different areas. So there are three major contributors, I would say, to Alzheimer's disease, and these are based on three different proteins. So one of the major ones is the amyloid precursor protein, which is the protein that forms plaques in the brains, and there's a lot of research surrounding that area. The second protein is called the tau protein, and these form the tangles which form within the neurons and kind of kill the cell from the inside. There's a lot of research going on in that area, and my area focuses on the protein that I mentioned before, ApoE4, and how that causes pathology. So, and we have investigators here at the Gladstone that are working on all three of these areas. In the case of ApoE4, it causes its problems because the protein is usually there to help to protect your brain if there is some injury. And this injury could be a stroke, it could be a physical injury, or it could be aging because that in itself tends to damage the brain. And the ApoE protein is usually there for good to help to protect your brain. But if you have the ApoE4, which is the one that increases your risk of getting Alzheimer's, this protein can't do the job that it was meant to do, and the cell recognizes it as having an abnormal shape and tries to get rid of it, and then this causes a whole other set of problems. So the research that we're doing is trying to find a way to make ApoE4 do the job it was meant to do by fixing the structure of the protein. So what we hope is that one day the drugs that we are developing here at the Gladstone, that we would be able to use this to hopefully prevent the disease from happening. And that would be our goal.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here. I mean, you probably have a better feel for it. I mean, is it just one day, all of a sudden, there's going to be an announcement saying, we found the cure? Okay? Or is it just known amongst you and your peers that this is going to take many, many years? Which is it?
So the optimist in me would like to believe that we would have an announcement, that we will have a cure. The realist and the scientist, and knowing the daunting task that we have ahead of us, especially because, as I said, so Alzheimer's disease and the pathology and the clinical symptoms that one has is kind of the end result. But we know that there are many roads that lead towards this end pathology and clinical problems that the patient has. So I think there will have to be maybe some sort of combination of therapies one day that will be used, because you have the amyloid building up. You have the tau protein forming the tangles in your neurons. You have the ApoE4. So we have all of these different angles that are leading to the problems, and these problems actually begin decades before you have the clinical symptoms. So I believe that what we will hopefully one day have would be something that we can take that can help to prevent this disease from happening. I don't think that once you have the disease that we will have a cure, because as I said, what you're losing are the brain cells that hold your memory, so that there is no drug that can bring those brain cells back and bring back the information that they stored. But what we can hopefully do is prevent the loss of these brain cells by treating relatively early in the progression of the disease.
That's a very good point. It's positive. It's positive. It's just it's hard for someone who has a loved one with it, knowing that there's no way of turning it back. But that's just the reality. I'm a consultant in the business, and I'm just seeing more and more younger people, and I'm talking even into their 40s and 50s and early 60s being diagnosed with dementia, with Alzheimer's. Is it just that I'm just seeing that, or are you hear statistics showing that more and more younger people are getting it, or we're just more aware?
I think we are more aware. So the people who get very early onset Alzheimer's disease, that's a relatively small proportion of the population. But I think because you are, as you said, you are in the business and you are very aware of the symptoms, and you're dealing with this kind of on a daily basis, I don't think the numbers necessarily of the people who are getting it younger are increasing. That's a pretty defined set from this hereditary form. But the sheer number of people who are living past a certain age is definitely increasing. So that then increases the population. And as I said, right now we have 5.1 million people, and this is just in the U.S. And this number is going to triple. So that just tells you, as our population ages and we have a larger and larger pool going into this risk group, this is why we're seeing more and more numbers of people having the disease.
Do you happen to know that 5.1 million that you bring up, is that what we're aware of, or is that what we're aware of plus figuring a certain amount more that have it that we're not aware of?
That is actually an excellent question. I think that might be the numbers that we are aware of. Right. Because obviously there would be some patients who are taken care of by their family members at home, and who are not necessarily brought into the clinic, and the family decides that they can handle the situation and deal with it at home. So there definitely might be a proportion of patients who are not seen by clinicians and who are not clinically diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. This is very possible.
Yeah, so those numbers could be quite a bit higher.
Yes, they can definitely be a bit higher.
Yeah. So, we have got a couple minutes left. I'd love for you to talk about the Gladstone Institute a little more. If people wanted to get more information on what you're doing and your peers are doing, could they go? Is there a website that they could go to? And what do you recommend as far as people want to keeping up on this, on your research?
Okay, so that's a great question, and thanks for asking. So you can go to www.gladstoneinstitutes.org, and there we have a really fabulous webpage that you can get an overview of all the different forms of science that we are doing here at the Gladstone. The work on Alzheimer's disease is major, but it's just one area that we are researching. As I said, we do work on immunology, virology, stem cell research, which is really huge right now at the Gladstone, cardiovascular disease, and then different forms of neurological disease. So you can check out www.gladstoneinstitutes.org to find out more about us.
Well, I want to thank you for all you do. I mean,
thank you very much.
It's tremendous. There's just such a need, and I hope. Well, let me ask you this: if somebody wanted to even contribute to this from a dollar standpoint, is Gladstone takes contributions as well to help in this research, or is it mainly
Definitely
coming like through the Alzheimer's Association, or how does that work?
So we do receive funding from the federal government, from funding agencies like the Alzheimer's Association. But as you can imagine, the number of federal dollars has decreased a little bit over the years, and there's a lot of competition for funding, and the need for money to support our research is definitely critical. So there is a link on our website called Supporting Gladstone that people can go to if they wanted to donate to one particular area or just simply to the Gladstone itself to support our research. Because this is another area that we have gone into to support the research, is looking at private funders. So this is definitely possible.
Well, Dr. Andrews-Zwilling, it was a pleasure to have you on. We got to have you on again because I know there's going to be more and more developments going on with this research. So I hope you'll join us again in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. And I also wanted to thank you for the work that you are doing to raise awareness about the disease and about research that's going into it. It's really critical to have voices like yours also. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thanks for joining us on the Aging Boomers. What you all can do to help is go to iTunes and download this, not only this podcast, but all of ours. And just you could go on and I think it's registering for it, but and share it with others so we could help educate people out there on all these issues facing boomers, their parents, and of course an aging population. You could also go to my website at theagingboomers.com to see the podcast as well. And again, thank you for joining us. Have a safe week, and we'll talk to you all soon.